Hey folks, welcome back to the DarkHorse Podcast live stream Q&A number 105. No, I don't say 105, I say 105.
Yes, you do.
Yes, I do.
All right. The Discord question this week is speculation. Children who more strongly resemble their father are more likely to survive because he is more certain they are his. If true, would you expect to see pressure towards a stronger expression of paternal genes in terms of physical appearance?
Interesting. This was a topic of discussion in my graduate laboratory, the Alexander Lab, in the insect division, where most of us did not study insects because that was just kind of the gathering place for renegades. But anyway.
Well, Dick Alexander studied insects, and so he was the major advisor for some of the people there, but he was on my committee, and I was there even though I studied frogs, he studied bats.
Yeah, there were bird people, there were mammal people, there were some insect people.
There were some periodical cicada people.
Periodical cicada, which are insects. So, in any case, the logic actually came out different than you're suggesting here. The logic is that actually babies don't look human to obscure their paternity, which on the one hand, I see the logic of your question, but the point is, if no baby looks human, then fathers are less likely to interpret the look of their unearthly looking child as indicative of it not being their child. That's the way the logic goes, rather than a arms race in which children are favored to express genes that highlight the paternal features.
Come again.
The point was there was no good way for babies to advertise their phenotypic characteristics that would make them appear to be more likely it's hard to know what terminology to use here. If the idea is that a child that does not look like its father is more likely to come to harm, evolutionarily speaking, then the Discord question suggests, why doesn't the baby then advertise the characteristics that would reassure its putative father that the putative father was in fact the actual genetic father of the child?
Advertise, and specifically, like what, maybe why doesn't, at least as a newborn or as a young child, kids more closely resemble their fathers and their mothers, since there's no uncertainty of maternity possible.
Right. The problem is that the benefit that one imagines from the child reassuring their putative father is more than erased by the danger of alerting a putative father that he is not, in fact, the father. So the point is, this actually pulls in the direction of not saying much about parentage.
Predicting that there won't be any imprinting of paternal or maternal genes to express phenotype that more closely resembles mom or dad in newborns. But what we would predict, and what we do in fact see in many cultures, including our own, is the software layer takes over. Right now, we are you would predict that the family of the mother of a newborn would be likely to exclaim in joy and delight how much the new baby looks like dad.
Yes.
Right.
Whether or not the new baby
Whether
looks
or not
like
the
dad.
new baby does in fact look like dad.
Right.
If mom is pair bonded, and hopefully with or without any evidence that there was any cheating going on, you would predict that there would be a lot of exclamations about how dad looking the baby looks, as opposed to how mom looking the baby looks, at least right at first.
Right. Now, I will add one little extra goodie here, which is, I believe that for similar reasons, you would actually imagine that when women cheat, they tend to cheat with men who look like their partners, because it will tend to, it will obviously predispose the babies to look enough like the investing parent to not trigger insecurities.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but it's an interesting prediction.
And it could have something to do with why this would be in the case of women, why some women would have a type.
Yeah, I was thinking that, but I mean, I can see this argument going the opposite direction as well. And maybe you would want to get into more predictions that would have to avoid hand-waving territory around under what circumstances are you attracted to type as opposed to something broader or even anti-type.
Right.
Yeah. But that, yeah, maybe.
All right.
So that was the Discord question. Here is the first question that was submitted today. Love you too. Wait a minute.
I mean, so far so good.
Somehow I'm not signed in anymore. Oh, okay. No, I can read this first question, but then I have to get re-signed in because I can't. All my ordering is gone. This was not the first question, but I'm going to read it and then I got to. What happened? Okay. Love you too. Thank you for all the sanity during these hard times. A, have you read the recent study indicating spike impairs DNA damage repair? What implications does this have for the vaccine? And how long do you think the body will produce spike after the mRNA vaccine? I can't find any reliable answers on this. So I'm going to let you take the lead on this while I log back in.
So I would say a number of things. A, anytime we have an implication of spike protein, which we do in many of the questions surrounding COVID, you have to ask yourself, to what extent are the vaccines distinct from the pathogen itself? And there will be some important distinctions, right? So we've got, in the case of the vaccines, we have the introduction of either DNA or RNA that causes the production of spike protein, which is supposed to lodge in the cell surface. We know that it doesn't always stick. And so there's some free-floating spike in the case of vaccines. We don't know what happens. As far as I know, we don't know what happens in the case of an actual infection. There's spike protein produced. Cells that have been infected are presumably killed and cleaned up by cytotoxic T cells, for example, and macrophages. And so there's a question about, is there free-floating spike associated with the infection? And then the big question, the thing that I think is hard to spot, is so we've got this result that says spike protein interferes with DNA repair. Now, on the one hand, that could be dire if the spike protein is highly likely to disrupt repair, and a small amount of spike protein does it, and the spike protein ends up circulating around the body, and so there's a lot of DNA repair disrupted. On the other hand, if it's only in a small number of cells, it may not be a significant effect, right? It'll be an effect. It will damage some cells. It can cause an occasional cancer, presumably. But the real question, and one of the questions that I think underlies the whole issue of the vaccine design, is that when you take mRNAs, for example, and you coat them with the lipid nanoparticles and you dump them into the body so that they will be taken up by cells, there's no good way to control how much gets taken up and by what cells. This is a very haphazard process. And what that means is that for the vaccines to be effective in a case where they are taken up very little, if you imagine a bell curve of uptake, right, where over here you have very low uptake, over here you have very low uptake, here you have average uptake, and here you have very high uptake, right? In order for people in the low uptake group to have gotten enough to do the job of the vaccine, then those who are in the average and high uptake group will have gotten a whole heck of a lot, right? And so the point is, this isn't...
we don't know enough about individual variation and physiological response in terms of what people can or do are uptaking to individually tailor dosages.
Right. And everything I think we've seen suggests that these vaccines, A, don't stay where we wanted them to stay, and B, are taken up by all kinds of different tissues. And so
there is the question of, on that first point, they don't stay where they're supposed to stay. There's this question of whether or not this is a perhaps largely, perhaps almost exclusively a human error problem with regard to the way in which the vaccines are given. I can't remember the name. It's not. Is it aspirate? No.
The aspiration.
It is aspiration.
Question.
It sounds like the wrong word.
This is one issue, but I think the basic first of all, you are a creature of 30 trillion, 40 trillion cells. Okay, that's a very large number. It's very hard for the human mind to wrap itself around that kind of number. So we have a cartoonish sense about how many cells that is, and it's a very wrong and misleading sense. To have this, I mean, the thing is, the lipid nanoparticles don't have an address on them, right? There's nothing that targets them at particular cells. They go where they go, and they get absorbed, and the ribosomes, which are in virtually every cell, then transcribe the message. And so they get in, the message gets transcribed, the immune system sees it, and it does its thing. But the point is, it's such a haphazard process that the amount of spike protein produced given to individuals that had a different physiological reaction to the vaccine is liable to be large. And so the truth is, I saw this report. It was delivered in very alarmist terms. Oh my God, the spike protein disrupts DNA repair. Well, DNA repair is very important, and the spike protein disrupting it is therefore not good. On the other hand, you can disrupt virtually any process in a tiny number of cells and not have a big effect on the body. Or if you do it in a large number of cells, the likely effect is going to be much bigger. Yeah. And so I don't think we have a good sense about how widespread this is likely to be. So it's certainly an interesting...
We don't have scale on any of these issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly interesting. There's no way it could possibly be good, right? And it could be very, very bad. But I don't think we know that it is very, very bad.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is there a safe and sane country, which is not Sweden, to go to? I'm in Germany. Will it get better after the winter? Thank you for all your work. Interesting. This is from Nina, someone named Nina, that she, I think, is excluding Sweden, and I wonder why. We were just talking this week about how interesting it is that Sweden seemed to have kind of explicitly and with intention gone the anti-authoritarian route throughout this, and was sort of roundly mocked by many in early pandemic, and certainly has had some spikes at some moments when other countries weren't, but has by and large done pretty damn well for itself. And it never did lockdowns. I didn't even have mask mandates. And actually, I'll just say this, and this is exactly not about the question because she says not Sweden, but I asked a friend of ours for grad school who's actually lived in Sweden for the last several years, and I think summer of last year. And I was like, what's going on there? Like, what is the Swedish government doing? Like, all over the rest of the weird world, there are at least masks at this point. I was convinced that masks were doing a lot of good. And our friend said in response, the Swedish government has cultivated in the populace of Sweden the response that if it says you must do something, the populace will do it. And in part, it has cultivated that by never overreaching. It does not say you have to do things when it's actually kind of just strongly encouraging you to do things. And so her take was the Swedish government is playing this cool and playing it hands off, and it reserves the right to say, actually, now you gotta. And because it never abuses that power, it actually has it in reserve in a way that, clearly at some level, the American government is playing, trying all sorts of tricks, pulling all sorts of stupid tricks out of its bag that aren't working very well because they play that trick too often. They play this, they show their hand and they play the same card over and over and over again, where they say, you gotta, why? Just because we say so, try again.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a couple things tied up in here. One, there's a question of why exclude Sweden, because it might be the answer to the question. Yeah. Two is the question that I fear we will never have the answer to, but whether this has been the greatest lesson in welcome to complex systems ever devised, and that basically our interventions, the net impact of them will have been negative. And that we would have actually been better off if we had not intervened. And I'm not saying that this is a good policy, because there has been a tremendous amount of death, and that is very unfortunate. But the point is, it was never a threat to the population as a whole. It was a threat to the old and infirm. And herd immunity is a real phenomenon. And so there is a question about, do you want to play this game indefinitely, or do you want it to run its course and to be done with it?
And if we're willing to play this game with this pathogen, we're going to, it's going to be easy to convince a whole lot of people to play it with others, because frankly, as much death and destruction as this particular virus seems to have wrought, it's hardly the worst pathogen we've encountered.
Oh, yeah. It's not that at all.
Yeah.
It's bad. But the point is, in part, we've focused on it in a way that we typically ignore harms. And so anyway, I guess what I would say is, I don't know that we will ever have a proper analysis of the net effect of our interventions. But let's say that the interventions were needed and desirable and reduced harm, but some countries didn't employ them, right? There still would be an argument now, if she's looking for a country that one could go to, a country that did nothing and therefore basically had accumulated a lot of immune people by virtue of having had COVID, it might be the place to move to now, even if the policy that got there was a mistake.
Right. Yes. I don't know which those countries are. Mexico seems appealing, and not, they didn't have that. They didn't do hands off, but they have been willing to not just follow in lockstep what the WHO says.
Yeah.
For instance, they have, at least in places, given out both prophylactic and early treatment packs that included, drugs that were not being given for the reason that they are stated as the only reason they should be given.
Yeah.
And where else though? I don't.
Africa.
Places in Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many countries in Africa. I feel like there's going to be variation, but sort of within the tropics, tropical Africa. Seems to have done
less and suffered less from COVID for various reasons. It can be vitamin D, can be part of it, an endogenous reason. It can be ivermectin being used for parasites. It can be a lot of different reasons. But nonetheless, I don't think there's a good answer to this question. I mean, basically, I think for the first time in human history, we are stuck with the question of, there's nowhere to run. What do you do? And the answer is, you fight. That's what you do. But no, I don't think it's a good place to go. But yes, it depends what you're trying to avoid, what your top priority is here. There might be solutions to that one thing.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. This actually is more of a comment. For an individual, it is surely best to live on your feet. Next, to live on your knees. Then to die on your feet, and worst, to die on your knees. But at the population level, sometimes dying on your feet paves the way for and inspires many others to live on theirs.
It's very well said. And I would say this is another place where an understanding that lineage is not a vague term, that it is an evolutionary entity, and it is the thing that selection cares about, is key, because what we find is that people behave in ways where they may die on their feet, so others may live on their feet. And that is not a paradox or a non sequitur or any of those things. It's a historical process. And so it does tell us something about what our choices are. But I think your taxonomy is a good one.
Yeah, I agree as well. Have either of you heard of a mass formation? Professor Matthias Desmet speaks of this. Thanks for the continued sharing of sanity. And the person writing links to a piece about Dr. Matthias Desmet, and I'm just going to read the 4 conditions that this person, Thomas Casey, says about what the 4 conditions are. 4 conditions need to be present to create mass formation. 1, there needs to be a lot of socially isolated people or people who experience a lack of social bond. 2, people who experience a lack of sense-making, unable to come to sensible conclusions. 3, there was a lot of free-floating anxiety, Free floating because there's nothing to connect their anxiety to, no focal point, unable to identify what's causing it, and so no way to deal with it. And 4, there's also a lot of free floating psychological discontent. People may experience their daily lives as lacking any purpose or meaning. So we've met all of those 4 things. You want to say something more about mouse formation?
Yeah, I am persuaded there's something important in this model. I've been tracking it for, I don't know, month and a half. And the idea is that what we are seeing are people behaving under something akin to hypnosis, a kind of hypnosis that kicks in when these conditions attain. And I must say, I don't feel that you and I are under this hypnosis, and I do feel that we are encountering a world full of people that is behaving almost as if they are sleepwalking on autopilot under some kind of hypnosis, who are not, in many cases, acting according to their own character and values. And so this is very alarming. And I think we've been trying to raise the alarm about this. For example, I think we may have been the first, if not, we were very early in pointing out that this trope about portraying some segment of society as disease-ridden, right, as subhuman and disease-ridden, is extremely ominous, because it is the precursor to behaviors in which you do away with such people, and you are entitled to do away with those people. For one thing, you don't have to worry too much about them because they weren't even fully human to begin with. And for another thing, they are causing disease, and therefore each one of them represents like a walking source of death.
Yeah, there's so many reasons that they're gross and dispensable.
Right. And so we now see this portrayal again and again. I saw it as recently as today in an article, I believe it was the Washington Post, talking about the number of deaths this year as compared to last year, which is something I want to return to maybe next live stream.
I think Wall Street Journal maybe. But
was it? Oh, maybe it was the Wall Street Journal. But in any case, it very clearly paints a picture that is not borne out by the evidence at all, in which, yes, it's those pesky unvaccinated who are causing the rest of us to be in danger of this deadly disease. And it's like, that story doesn't even add up, right? Of course, as many people have recognized, there's something weird about a vaccine that requires other people to get it in order for it to work to protect you, right? That's not a high quality vaccine at the very least. It's lackluster.
Might not be deserving of the name.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah. Might not have been deserving of an experiment in which we attempt to vaccinate the entire world, but okay. So anyway, yes, mass formation is well worth tracking. I don't know that it's 100% accurate as a model, but I will say, if you walk around thinking, am I dealing with hypnotized people, and is that why they're behaving this way? It seems to be more enlightening than it is confusing. So anyway, keep tracking it.
Indeed. Where are we 1 year from now? What will the state of the world look like? Thank you. We greatly appreciate you taking the time each week. This from someone whose name here is Don't Distance from Nature.
Well, I mean, as a planet, a year from now, we're going to be right here. I mean...
Can you map out for us where we're going to be 3 months from now as a planet?
I mean, yeah.
Oh, wait.
Oh, no.
We got a problem.
That's bad.
He's going to tear the whole thing down.
I am really glad I tightened that. Otherwise, we could have had a little catastrophe. A catastrophe is what we could have had. Yes. For those of you who are just listening and not watching,
That's
nothing
not happening
happened.
Here. That's
right.
in the Q&A, so.
Well, there could be people with their eyes closed.
I hope not. Not at this point. Well, we got cat hour here.
We do.
Yeah.
Where are we going to be a year from now?
Besides here.
I shudder to think. I don't think these people have left themselves a graceful exit from this authoritarian nonsense. And
Dude.
I worry about where we're going to be. I also worry that the places that you would think would be most immune to this garbage seem to be especially if they're in the southern hemisphere, engaged in absolutely remarkable and self-defeating policies.
In places with like almost no cases of COVID, in which they're claiming that, the death of someone past their life expectancy is a tragedy and warrants shutting down cities and such. So it's
right. I mean, it may be a
insane.
tragedy, but destroying civilization over it is not obviously a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah. So I have been trying. I have not been in an optimistic frame of mind for a couple of weeks about where we're going to be in a year and what this all means about humanity. Because if we get out of this one, there's going to be another one, and there will need to be a reckoning. There will need to be a moment in which everyone who went authoritarian, who went ash positive, who said, that mile-long line is shorter than the inch-long line because MSNBC told me so, looks themselves in the mirror and says, I did that. I fell for it. I stated it publicly. I was wrong. I shamed people who didn't need to be shamed, who shouldn't have been shamed. I was part of the problem. I should not fall prey to that part of myself again. What do I need to do? I'm worried that reckoning, even if we get out of this, is not going to happen. So I say that probably should have come second, but one of the few things that gives me some hope right now of emerging from this one, which again isn't a solution because we need it not to be able to happen like this again, but it is now ever more widely recognized that these vaccines have very low efficacy. Put aside the safety questions entirely for the moment. That they're, even that crazy Atlantic thing that I read from in the first hour says, antibodies peak 3 weeks after. Like, yeah, and some research that we talked about a couple of weeks ago said 2 to 3 weeks, 2 to 3 months after your second dose, you're already getting waning immunity, and that's why they're talking about boosters. But it is my sense, because of people we talk to and because of the people we talk to. And so, yes, this is sort of anecdotal, but it is my sense that there are a lot of people who got vaccinated as they were supposed to, were dutiful about it, didn't ask too many questions, or maybe they did, and they still decided to get vaccinated. And because of what they have seen since, it could be about injury, it could be about the lies from the politicians or the public health authorities, or the recognition that they appear to have signed up for an unending treadmill as opposed to one and done and we're out of this. Could be for a lot of reasons, but that a lot of people who signed up for the first two are not going to do boosters. I think that is why I think that the government, as incompetent as it seems in many regards, can read that wind well enough right now that is why we have not seen mandatory boosters. That frankly, if you got vaccinated in February of this year, the idea that you're still considered fully vaccinated is laughable. Whatever fully vaccinated may have meant at the time. Is laughable. And so at what point does your Vax card that is getting into like restaurants in Seattle, which you can't go into if you're not vaccinated at this point, for instance, at what point does that require a booster to get you in? A lot of people who got vaccinated aren't going to do with boosters, and then we're going to have an even larger number of people who are saying, wait a minute, why are my civil liberties being curtailed? Why am I one of the dirty ones now? I even followed your orders the first time, and now I didn't follow them enough, even though your orders just have gotten stupider and stupider. So that I think is what can break here. It's one thing to call those of us who never got the jab dirty and vermin, and the reason that the thing is continuing and all of this, all of which is untrue. But it's going to be quite another sleight of hand for them to convince everyone who's eagerly signing up for boosters that even the people who got their first two and just are not signing up for infinite boosters more are also dirty and vermin and causing the problem.
Yes, to the extent that this is initially about a pathogen, and it is now about something else that involves at least compliance.
Yeah.
It may also involve, I don't know, the content of these inoculations. But and the destruction of the control group so that we can't ever see what the consequence of this was. The question about, I don't know how to say it delicately, right? The vaccine card thing and the booster thing and the fact that some people will not get a booster who did get the initial set of vaccinations. And, look, lots of people are in that camp today, but, we're going to see an arms race, and they're going to put on the pressure to get boosters, and lots of people will buckle for the same reasons that they buckled the first time, which are that they want to engage in normal life. And this is the carrot that is going to be offered to allow them to engage in normal behaviors, whether or not it makes any sense. And I don't know. I don't know how that game plays out. But from the point of view of, does it make any sense to say that you're fully vaccinated? Obviously, your other point's a really good one. If 3 weeks is where these things peak and it starts trailing off, there's such a thing as fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
Are you at the peak or are you somewhere else? And the real point is that fully vaccinated may be the way people wearing masks that don't have a positive effect may be a hallmark of compliance more than it is an immunological fact.
Yeah, I follow the rules.
Yeah.
Why don't you?
Why don't you? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hi, do you know much about the safety of the whooping cough vaccine? My sister is having a baby soon and wants me to get it. I'm 26. Thanks. Interesting. At 26, you don't say where you're writing from, but I would have thought that basically 100%, very close to 100% of 26-year-old Americans had been vaccinated against whooping cough as children.
It's in the DPT vaccine, is that right?
Whooping cough is pertussis. Yeah, exactly. And that said, I remember there was actually a pertussis outbreak in one of our boys' schools when they were very young.
Yep.
And I don't actually remember. I don't remember any of the details. Our boys are both vaccinated against it, as are we, from long ago. So I have actually never heard of an adult pursuing the whooping cough vaccine, and that's really that's my only question. I just don't know to what degree it's generated for. I don't even remember if it's one of the almost the neonate vaccines, or it's got a course over a few years.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I can say I know nothing specific about it. I can say, 2 years ago, I would have said, as far as I know, it's a safe vaccine. Now the shenanigans I've seen would cause me to do my own homework before getting vaccinated. Presumably it's a safe vaccine, but
well, I mean, it of course, right. I agree with you exactly. And, what's the back? So the fact that we experienced with one of our boys at one of their schools, there was an outbreak, as I remember it. And it was just a couple people maybe. But that tells you not much about the background rate of pertussis. I feel like pre-COVID, we used to hear in the news national, couple places a year, there'd be pertussis outbreaks. So, if the background rate where your sister is basically zero, if there haven't been any outbreaks in forever, then that's a different situation. Although, air travel makes that analysis tough to do.
Yeah.
Because people can bring it in.
Obviously we don't know your living situation, but it does seem to me that the chances that your being vaccinated protects your sister's child from a case of this rare disease is so close to zero that you ought to be able to have a conversation if you really have a reason not to want that vaccine.
It's curious that you're not vaccinated,
right?
So that's there's a lot of the backstory we don't know.
Yeah, and it also seems like were whooping cough to show up, right? You could take action then, knowing that you were not vaccinated to protect your niece. But so I don't know. I guess we don't know.
You just assumed the baby's gender, sex actually. To hell with gender. Babies don't have gender.
I assumed that they were a match.
No, it's the sister. That's where you got female from. You don't know the sex of the baby.
well, we're talking about a future case of pertussis, and I know that the future is female.
Oh, wow. Oh, that was good escape, though. That's Houdini-like and
yes,
efficacy, really.
Right. All right. I don't remember where we were, but I think we've delivered enough information.
I do too. What's the most surprising fact you learned in Evo Devo? For me, it was that over 100 different types of eye structures independently evolved. Love you guys. This is from Chop Citizen. One of the favorite person that I had to teach with at Evergreen was this geneticist and developmental biologist. He was a developmental biologist. He also taught genetics. And he and I would teach development and evolution together. And in fact, one of the programs we taught together was called Development and Evolution : something. And we specifically chose that order so as not to have it be mistaken for an Evo Devo class. And I had less concern about it, but he had actually escaped, one of these very elite institutions and come to Evergreen, and said, I'm not interested in your shenanigans and games anymore. And what he had seen of the discipline of Evo Devo had so unimpressed him that he had the sense of like, I don't want to be associated with that. I want to understand development. I want to understand evolution, but calling it Evo Devo isn't that interesting to me. So I don't, I've never taken a class called Evo Devo. I don't know what is supposed to be included in it, but over 100 different types of eye structures independently evolved is certainly fascinating. And one thing that prompts me to think is the fact that in like these cave fish that live in total darkness, they lose their eyes, not as individuals, but they don't have eyes and then gradually lose them. Population loses their eyes. Thank you. But it's effectively a toggle. It's effectively a genetic toggle, and that if those if the ceiling collapses and they're in the light again, very quickly, they don't regrow eyes slowly over generations. The eyes are either on or off, and just fascinating to me. Like, that struck me as very surprising that there would be a discrete toggle like that on something as complex as an eye in a lineage which had already evolved the eyes over
that had a very highly refined eye.
Exactly.
Yeah. On the other hand, that really is the key message of Evo Devo is that most information is latent, and the subset of information that is not latent is what allows you to be an organized creature rather than a puddle of similar cells, right? And yeast. I'm sure there are yeast biologists out there who will shake their fist at me for saying this, but yeast kind of is a puddle of similar cells. It's a colonial phenomenon rather than an organism. And the point is the organismal nature of critters.
So you're restricting the use of the word organism to multicellular with differentiation between cells. Yes.
I am, in this case, I'm saying, yes, an organism is a differentiated creature. Now, is a
differentiated between different types of cell types. And multicellular
right.
itself.
The reason I'm hesitant is because I would also call a yeast cell an organism, right? But the point is the colony isn't exactly an organism. And so it's one of these distinctions that I'm not sure we have rich enough language, but the basic point is.
But it's a fascinating one because it changes all sorts of things about shared fate and what individual cells are going to do
right. And the colonial stuff is way more interesting than we give it credit for as well. In fact, I have long argued that things like conjugation in bacteria, where bacteria are exchanging plasmids and things, have to do with the fact that those colonies of organisms have an organismal nature to them that we don't typically recognize, right?
Yeah.
We see it happen, but we don't understand its meaning. So anyway, the point is Evo Devo allows latency. Latency allows a library to produce an organism by encoding a subset. And, the fact that the amazing fact is developmentally, your cells know where they are, both by chemical context, right? What signals they're getting from neighboring cells, and a count of how many cell divisions have taken them down their line from the zygote, and the combination of those things tells them what subset of the library to transcribe, and that makes a liver cell.
Borders.
Right. So those two things provide information about what to do. You can get from there to, well, what happens if you damage some set of tissue, and then you can replace it, right? If we cut a hole in your arm, you can replace it with cells that are appropriate, right? If we cut off your arm, we can't. Right. On the other hand, there are.
But in neither case do you get liver cells trying it out.
Right. Although in a cancer, you will get that.
Sure. But if you have a wound on your arm, or the wound is your arm is missing, in neither case does the early attempt to wound heal, which is possible in the first case and not possible in the second, do you get the wrong cell type?
The wrong cell types. Right. There's a contingency program, and it's relevant. And then, in a few creatures, a few salamanders, for example, you can get limb regeneration. So proving that it's possible. So the fact that we don't have it is interesting.
Yeah. In vertebrates, not in invertebrates. In vertebrates, it's almost unknown, except you can get whole limb regeneration in bistomatids, I think. Yeah. Salamanders. Yeah.
So anyway, all I'm getting at is that I actually think I hate that it's called Evo Devo, and I hate sort of the culture around it a little bit. Maybe I don't hate it, but I don't love the culture around it. But it almost strikes me as the only interesting thing that's happened evolutionarily since 1976 is the discovery of this whole mechanism that basically is the difference between, a cell and an organism.
Well, and I think, in a way, that the book that I love so much, Mary Jane West Eberhard's book on phenotypic plasticity, is kind of a tome about Evo Devo.
You're right. It's the it's the Evo Devo coming from the Evo side rather than the Devo side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know what this question means, but it's next up, so I will read it. But I don't even know what one of these words is. What's the adaptiveness of phatic questions and answers, PHATIC, where deception / obfuscation / salesmanship / abbreviation of one's condition is expected? I think I might understand that more if I look up phatic.
Is it related to emphatic?
That's what I thought. Do you recognize it?
No, I don't. Okay. I will say, so I have
of or relating to communication used to perform a social function rather than to convey information or ideas. That's a useful word.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the adaptiveness of phatic questions and answers, where deception, obfuscation, salesmanship, abbreviation of one's condition is expected? It's going to be entirely context dependent, isn't it?
It's not how I would do the taxonomy here. So I have a module.
Where's the? I don't see a taxonomy here.
Phatic, where conveying information versus social function. That doesn't strike me as natural.
You don't like the word phatic. You don't like the description.
No, I may like the word phatic perfectly well, but I don't like it as an evolutionary division. Here.
Okay.
In other words, I think it's useful. If that's phatic's definition, that's cool. That's very useful to be able to describe things in that category. Yeah. But the problem is that that's not evolutionarily where I would draw the line.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I would draw the line at what I call perception mediated selection.
Yeah.
Right. And the point is there are certain things that are mediated by actual interaction with the universe. Yeah. And there are other things that are mediated by the perception of a critter, and they behave very differently evolutionarily. And so the problem is that phatic here excludes informational communication, where I would say informational communication is perception mediated. And so anyway, I would just draw the categorization differently.
Yeah, boy, there's a lot more to go there. Let's move on. That's very interesting. How is it possible that wild deer got COVID? It seems unlikely that a deer was in a closed space with an infected human, right? Love the show.
The deer thing is so odd.
It really is.
And the thing is, I expected it to be nonsense when I first looked into the paper.
I think we talked briefly about it too. We're like,
Yeah.
not convinced.
But it's not nonsense.
Yeah,
The part of the
it
work that
seems
I can
not to
see
be
was
nonsense.
done correctly. They corrected for exactly the thing that I thought it was going to be.
Remind
right?
me what that was? Or maybe it doesn't matter.
So they have widespread distribution of
It's
COVID.
whitetail or mule?
Whitetail,
yeah.
East Coast whitetails.
Uh-huh.
Widespread COVID in these creatures. Too widespread for it to be plausible, in my opinion. Like if a population got it, I would expect that. But for it to be across the entire range, especially given that the pathogen doesn't transmit outdoors, right? There's a problem.
Yeah, what's going on?
And so what I expected was that they had gone out to say, oh, are there any wild creatures that get COVID? And they tested deer and came up positive and reported. That's not the case. They have samples prior to the COVID pandemic, which don't come up positive. And then they have samples afterwards. So it's not a question of they went out and they found some other coronavirus that's triggering their test.
Okay.
Right?
But it's not like a cycle threshold issue?
Could be. Could be any one of a number of things. Let's just say I'm very suspicious that the result can't mean what they seem to think it means, but I'm not convinced that they did the work badly, and therefore it's an actual serious question. And maybe, I mean, again.
And if it really isn't all the deer, then we have it. Like we're living with it.
Yeah. Look, I am not signing up for this construction with a virus that appears to have come out of a laboratory because
This is always your rejoinder.
Yeah, I don't know that we know anything that we can apply any of our normal
Might
heuristics.
there not be a kill switch?
Sure. Great example.
Right.
What if what if they built a kill switch in and it hasn't been triggered, but I don't know.
Right. Okay.
So yes.
I just got my CCW. That's we looked it up. Concealed carry weapon permit. Right. Just got my CCW in the mail literally today when I went into the Multnomah County office. So this is someone who went to exactly the same office that you were in this week that you showed pictures of. When I went into the Multnomah County office to do my paperwork 4 months ago, it looked identical to the pictures that you all showed today. I also took pictures. It was so surreal.
Yeah, it's almost
that's amazing. So, and I really appreciate that because I was left going like, are we sure this didn't just happen this week?
Yeah.
Although the fact that you said, and now Kyle is repeating that, like, well, he doesn't say this, but you said there were like literally shards of glass still in the window panes.
Yeah, not shards, but what
it was broken. It was
broken.
It's crazed. I mean, that was what you would call it in pottery, but yeah.
I can't. There's some. I mean, if a shard can be that big, it's a shard.
Yeah, but it's not shards extending into the air. Like they're entire panes that are shattered but in place.
No.
What?
It's like you take a big window and you break it, and some of it crashes to the floor, and some of it remains.
So it is shards. It is pieces. It's not the entire. Okay, so it is what I thought first. I thought you were saying it wasn't that.
No, to me, shards means something smaller, but I'm not convinced I have the definition right.
So if they're leaving big shards of glass sitting in the windows, boarded up on one side, but on the inside, you're just looking at this broken glass.
I mean, it's perfectly...
And apparently, it's what it looked like 4 months ago.
Right. It seems to me that they had an obligation, at the very least, just for safety's sake, that you would have to break out the large pieces of glass hanging in the window frames, right, at the point you were going to board it up, just so that, because those things are now not secure in an earthquake or... Yeah. Who knows? But
oh my God.
Yeah, it's completely bizarre.
Awful. Totally different question. How do you recommend urbanites drink water? Tap, filter, plastic bottles, etc.? Depends on where you live, honestly, because different urban water services, I don't know, I can't think of what the word is at the moment, will treat water differently, right? So the way that water is treated with fluoride is almost certainly not very good for you. And we talk about this a little bit in our book, Hunter-Gatherer's Guide, and there is an abundant literature on this. And we are not arguing that early on the recognition that naturally occurring fluoride in water wasn't associated with fewer cavities. It was. This was an honest to goodness observation from, if memory serves, the early 20th or late 19th century. But the particular fluoridation process, the particular fluoride that's put into water is not that same fluoride, and it's seemingly not very good for you. And so fluoridated water is also you can't titrate. You're not controlling how much you're getting. So a good drinking water from your tap is a luxury that we should all be able to enjoy if we live in places with taps. And so if you can get a filter either for your tap or something to sit on your counter in your refrigerator, something that actually filters out the stuff that you that because of what your particular urban situation is, what might be in your water supply.
Yeah, I would say a little chemistry goes a long way here, and activated charcoal is kind of marvelous. It's not very complex, right? You got charcoal. The process of activation is a high-tech process in which they crush it. And that's what activated
kind
means.
Of sounds fun, actually.
Yeah, but basically,
charcoal
it increases the surface area. And the basic point is that the nature of charcoal is that it's polar, right? And it has tremendous number of nooks and crannies. And so the basic idea is that anything in your water that is polar will encounter some of the carbon and stick to it. Now, this works temporarily. If you fill up the carbon so that all of the surface or most of the surface has encountered some polar thing that it has grabbed onto, then you will get weird things like you put some new polar stuff in there and it can actually release the stuff that's there if it has a higher affinity. So you want to change those filters regularly. But the basic point is an activated charcoal filter is not, if you do something radical like reverse osmosis, you take out a lot of the good stuff in your water.
Yes.
If you run your water through a basic filter that particle-wise will filter out large things like bacteria and
large things like bacteria.
And that filters out polar stuff. Well, if there's some pesticide in your water, it's almost certain to be polar. It's going to get filled. Why is it almost certain to be polar? Well, it's dissolved in your water. That's if it was an oil, it wouldn't have gotten into your water in the first place.
Yeah, if your water looks gross to the unaided eye, then you got a different level of problem.
Right.
And go to bottled water.
But I guess what I would say is activated charcoal is the low-hanging fruit, right? It does a lot of work taking out stuff like organic compounds that you wouldn't want to ingest. It doesn't destroy your water from the point of view of trace nutrients and things. And it's relatively cheap and relatively easy to use and doesn't, fail. If you replace it often enough, it's pretty good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we have... Portland doesn't fluoridate water, so I drink water out of the tap, and we also have a filter that we use. But neither are we religious about using it, nor do we insist that our children are. And obviously, the younger you are, the more potentially affected you will be by contaminants.
Yes, I would also say you mentioned plastic. I would be very concerned about plastics. Now, there was a kind of moment of awakening around BPA, and so you can check that things
That's one ingredient.
Right. Now, the fact is, this is not hard work. It drove me crazy when the BPA awareness jumped that one of the culprit companies was Nalgene. Right, and that there were all these Nalgene water bottles that had BPA that leached out into the water. Yeah. And the answer is Nalgene is actually primarily a labware company. Yeah. Which means they have the ability to know what their plastics are leaching into the water. They can't possibly been caught off guard, so they allowed it to happen, and that drove me nuts. And the question is, okay, so we've spotted BPA. You can very easily run water from any source that's been sitting in plastic through a gas chromatograph and a mass spec and see what's in it. So what we really want is not, is it BPA free? It's like, is this not leaching anything into my water, right? If I treat it badly, if I leave it in the sun, does this leach something into my water that I don't want to be ingesting? That's the answer you want. And so I would just say I'm hesitant about plastic. I'm doubly hesitant about plastic that has come in contact with anything warm. If you're going to drink out of plastic, you can do yourself a world of good by rinsing it, right? If there's plastic, if you've got plastic leaching into the water,
but not with hot water,
right? Cold water, you rinse it, right? You'll reduce the amount of stuff that's there from however long the water has been sitting on the surface of it to a tiny fraction, and then you drink from it quickly. And the point is, even if it's leaching, you won't get very much.
All right, next question. Given the Gibraltar fiasco, these vaccines don't work. Can we envision a realistic scenario where establishment Dems concede the vax failure? So neither you nor I were familiar with the Gibraltar fiasco, but you pulled up a thing that I thought there were two paragraphs in there that warranted reading.
All right. Yep.
You have to hand it to me.
Oh, I thought you had it there on your
No,
machine.
you never shared it with me. It's on your phone.
Oh my God, it's on my phone. It really puts the pressure on.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that neither of us had heard of the Gibraltar fiasco. But so Bret found this, and this is on RT. You said, right?
Yep.
Somehow this is not. Here we go. Gibraltar, a tiny British overseas territory sharing a land border with Spain, has seen an average of 56 COVID-19 cases per day over the last 7 days, up from fewer than 10 per day in September. The rise in cases, described by the government as exponential, comes despite Gibraltar having the highest vaccination rate in the world. Point of order, the rise in cases either is or is not exponential. The description of the government has nothing to do with whether it is. I will continue quoting now. Get off my little soapbox. More than 118% of Gibraltar's population are fully vaccinated. I'm sorry.
You all right?
Yeah, okay. Second paragraph. More than 118% of Gibraltar's population are fully vaccinated against COVID-19.
That's a lot.
With this figure stretching beyond 100% due to doses given to Spaniards who cross the border to work or visit the territory every day. Masks are still required in shops and on public transport. So they've got over 100%. Over 100% compliance. Somehow, that's some interesting math. But the rate of daily doses is five times what it was before.
Right.
So that's given the Gibraltar fiasco. That's the background on that question. These vaccines don't work. Can we envision a realistic scenario where establishment Dems concede the vax failure?
It is almost impossible to imagine the concession. It is not impossible to imagine the recognition on the public's part.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just say, we are here.
Absent concession, though, if the public, if the public starts to wake up, maybe because they refuse to take boosters or whatever, how will the Dems, what will they do in the next election?
Well, now you've asked a question. What will the Dems do in the next election? That's a question no matter what.
True.
For so many reasons. But look, I don't think these people have a game plan. I do think they're going to keep, will they admit that these vaccines don't work? I find that very unlikely. Mm-hmm. Will they?
It's probably too late to pin them on Trump, even though they were developed entirely under the Trump
presidency. No, they're going to pin the failure of the vaccines on the unvaccinated, an amazing fact in and of itself. And they will pivot to some other policy. It will be unclear. It will continue to be unclear what their objective is, right? In fact, that absolutely maddening article from the Wall Street Journal makes the amazing claim that part of the problem with the vaccines is that the people who released them botched the communication, and they led people to think that the purpose of the vaccines was to control the pandemic rather than to reduce extreme reactions to COVID, right? Sorry.
So I haven't read this article. If that's true, if that were true, how can you have that position and the unvaccinated are causing this?
And
you can't put those two things next to each other.
And the mandates. Because to the extent that their point is, this is for reducing hospitalizations, then the point is, then this really is a question of personal choice. Right? The only argument for the mandates.
If that is actually an accurate description of, we knew this all along, this is what it's actually
it ain't accurate. No,
but then it's not a public health thing.
Right.
It has nothing to do with public health.
Right.
This is the government trying to make sure that you have the best chance because you need this. Well, no thanks, government. I'm good. Would of course be a legitimate response in that case.
I mean, think about it this way. This is the nanny state, and think about what a terrible nanny state it is, because why the hell are we vaccinating children then?
That's what nannies do.
If it ain't about preventing transmission, vaccinating kids who are healthy and don't have any risk from this disease doesn't make any sense.
Well, so I mean that if you're quoting that article right, if they've got some muckety muck public health official saying we always knew, Pfizer always knew that, like the manufacturer of the vaccines always knew that it wasn't going to affect transmission. That actually changes everything.
They didn't say that, but believe me, there's no way to square this circle, right? And so your question about what
will the Democrats do if the public response starts to be, wait a minute?
I think the thing is, it's an escalator of mendacity, and we are.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
You just made that up?
No, I wish I had. But
escalator of mendacity.
Yeah.
I like that.
The point is, they are going to keep lying, right, in order not to take responsibility for having massively screwed this up, which they clearly have. No matter what you believe, you can see that they massively screwed it up, right?
Yeah.
This is not what we were promised, and it isn't doing what they told us it would do, and Gibraltar is a very good demonstration of that, right? So, we've had this problem where as the rate of vaccination goes up, the fraction of the people who get COVID who are vaccinated goes up. There is something ominous in that, but it's not inherently ominous, because at the point that you get to 100% vaccinated population, then everybody who gets a case will be a breakthrough. But what this does show is that is not effective at controlling the disease, right? Which then raises a question about everything they've done.
Yep. Worse than state lines. An alarming number of people think that Rittenhouse's victims were black, and the media political complex violates its own misinformation guidelines by not pushing back.
Yep, I've seen this. I've seen it actually reported in the bullet points under a headline. It's like, this is just
your fact checkers are too busy getting things wrong elsewhere. Is that the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, fact check has become an utterly ironic term.
I think we're at about an hour. Is that right, Zach?
It's a little bit hard to tell because Odysee collapsed and it's inside, but I think you're just over an hour.
Okay, let's do one more.
Okay.
I notice you don't wear your bandana anymore. Has your view on them changed?
Yeah, it has changed. I mean, let's put it this way. The evidence that masks are effective is pretty thin. To the extent that there is evidence that masks are effective, cloth masks do not appear to be. So I got that wrong. I've just started defaulting to an N95 mask, which
we just have a box of them. It's not that, we really need, I bought a box of them a long
I just
time
feel
ago,
like if
they come in their own little thing, and they're easy to pack and whatever.
Yeah. They're all right. And
they're black. They're subtle.
So yes, my position has changed on these things. I think the irony is there is a hierarchy of how utterly ineffective they are, and Bandana is, look.
Well, okay, but I have not gone deep into the mask literature, the mask efficacy literature. Surgeons and surgical staff wear masks during surgeries.
Yeah.
Other hospital staff during non-surgeries are also masked to go into certain rooms and wards, for instance, TB, I believe. I think that's true. Is there the suggestion that masks aren't effective against something like tuberculosis either?
No, it's not a general masks don't work for anything.
Right. So, if you're going to be stuck wearing a mask in the grocery store in January in Portland, or November, as it is, given that all sorts of other things are seasonal and you're more likely to get them now, maybe because you have less vitamin D, maybe because you're spending more time inside, whatever. Wearing a mask that actually has greater efficacy against other things, whether or not it actually has any efficacy here. I'm not gonna start shopping in the grocery store with masks on when I don't have to, for that reason. But you might as well make it as effective as possible, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure that any of the things that you might pick up at the supermarket are going to be effectively controlled by this if it's not an exotic thing, and how much surgeons wear them, to prevent bacteria from landing in a patient or something. But yeah.
A person that's been opened surgically is at a much different kind of risk than an attacked human being walking around.
So I will say, the problem is that the bandana always did have some very real advantages, right? Because you could wear it around your neck and pull it up, it was much less of a hassle. It actually doesn't fog the glasses in the same way because there's more room for air to go down. So that it's a superior version of a mask. The mask, like on your face, right over your nose, is bad for glasses. It's particularly uncomfortable and particularly confining, and so.
Also, facial hair will obviously interfere with the efficacy of masks.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. This has been a weird day.
Yeah, it has been a weird day.
It's been a weird day. We've had a lot of cat visits. Maybe we're there.
Yep, I think we're there.
Maybe we're there. We'll be back next week after Thanksgiving for episode 106. Who knows what we'll be talking about then? In the meantime, consider joining us at either of our Patreons, picking up a copy of Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, coming over to Natural Selections, my Substack, where I'm talking about higher ed these days, and a little bit about Thanksgiving. I posted something yesterday about Thanksgiving and some of our traditions. What else? There's other the Welcome to Complex Systems shirt is now available at the store. I couldn't tell you where to find the store. Oh, it's on the screen again.
DarkHorsePodcast.org.
Store. DarkHorsePodcast.org.
There it is.
And we'll be getting a few more things up. We'll show you about them next week. In the meantime, be good to the ones you love, eat good food, and get outside.
Be well, everyone.